Hi guys, it's Kat here, and I just wanted to have a little chat with you about the ways that we can simplify our lives. Because I suppose lockdown has shown me, and I know lots of other folks, very many things, and we've learnt some lessons here. And one really big lesson for me has been in the importance of decluttering life, which is funny because I'm not really an organized person who, I don't live in a sort of minimalist way generally. But I suppose what lockdown really has shown me is that my life is just way too overcomplicated. And I don't know if any of you feel like that. I know there's been a lot of parents who I have been chatting to, because of course there's been a lot more communication, a lot more phone calls, a lot more Zoom calls, and that's been lovely. And what I found out from lots of folks is that, especially with kids who have very complicated timetables, there's going to school, of course, picking them up, taking them back, and then a lot of children have incredibly complicated social life. It seems like there's parties all the time and friends and extracurricular activities. And it's kind of the same for me. It's like I found that, well, my diary is, it's funny, my diary for 2020 was absolutely jam-packed. It was really hard to have found just, if somebody had wanted to meet up for a coffee, it would have been really hard. The whole thing was absolutely wall-to-wall chocker. And so it's really interesting, obviously, COVID, as it did for most people, swept the board clean. So none of my appointments, none of the things that I normally do were going ahead. And it's really interesting what has come in that space. I mean, normally there'd be lots and lots of meetings, but then I'd kind of, I'd make little things around it. I'd meet up with somebody for lunch, or there'd be somebody interesting doing another thing, and I'd want to connect with them about it. So I'd end up doing a lot of stuff, even around just one meeting. So, and I think it's the same for lots of people. We really think that our diaries, our schedules are there to be crammed. And that somehow it seems that if there's an empty moment, it needs to be filled. And I suppose that's a really interesting sort of thing that our culture has brought us, because, busy has been something which, I'm really busy. It's some kind of accolade, some kind of accomplishment. You get some feeling of success. If you feel that you're very busy, you feel very important. I'm busy, I'm doing da-da-da. Especially if it's like, I'm busy, I'm working. There's no better thing in this society. But it's really interesting what happens when busy is taken away as a benchmark. And I've found, I suppose unsurprisingly, I've been a lot happier during lockdown because of this. And I know that lockdown has been a time of fear and anxiety and grief for a lot of people. And that's not to downplay it, but it's just also to say, well, these things, yes, but also what else? What else has been going on? And to take a little look at what lessons we have learnt from this enforced period of stillness and enforced decluttering. What have we learnt from that? So what have I been doing that I would like to continue, and that has brought me this sense of peace and happiness? Well, first of all, I've been able to take long walks in nature. Again, I know that I'm in a massive position of privilege, because many people in inner cities haven't been able to take the walks. But I think that even folks in the cities, because of the time of year, in the Northern Hemisphere it's springtime, just being able to observe a tree. In London, there's a lot of magnolia trees out, and just being able to observe that and having the time to pause and see nature, because nature's everywhere. You don't have to be lucky enough to live somewhere like I do. You know, you don't have to live in nature. You can see that nature is everywhere. You can see it in the trees. You can see it even in the most unsuspecting little places. If you take the time, I think that we've been lucky enough to see a lot of nature. And I know that it's been possible to hear a lot more bird song. There's been a lot less plane noise. And that's been a really, really beautiful reawakening. And again, it makes me wonder, what kind of world do I want to live in? Do I want to live in that very busy, overcomplicated world? Do I want to contribute to that very busy, overcomplicated world? Because with every car journey I take, with every travel decision, travel plan, everywhere I go, there's another car, there's another complication for everybody. It really does make it simpler for everybody if we are able to slow down. And then if we are, then obviously there's going to be a really nice knock-on effect for everybody else. So the nature, what kind of world do I want to live in? Do I want to live in that very busy, overcomplicated world? Do I want to contribute to that very busy, overcomplicated world? Because with every car journey I take, with every travel decision, travel plan, everywhere I go, there's another car, there's another complication for everybody. It really does make it simpler for everybody if we are able to slow down. And then if we are, then obviously there's going to be a really nice knock-on effect for everybody else. So the nature is one thing that's really been very important for me in my sort of simplification process. The next thing that I've really been interested by is the whole thing about schedules. Lockdown has been interesting because we've all been wanting to know what will happen when. Everybody's wanted to know, when will lockdown end? What's going on today? What's the latest thoughts on the science? Well, of course, it's really important for the scientists to know this. But for the rest of us, do we need to know? Is it possible for us to know? It's sort of brought to my mind some very sort of yogic thoughts about what it is to live a life of anxiety, and how in this culture, again, you know, we all want to know. We all think that the answer to everything is out there, and we have to find it out, and we have to know what the future is. And the future must be knowable for us all. And in fact, it's very interesting to notice what happens when that's taken away. So none of us knew when lockdown would be lifted. And how did that affect us? How is your mind being forced to live in just the present? Did you learn anything from that sort of being here now theme that we had in lockdown? It's not easy, of course, to take away schedules, because it's one thing to not have it during lockdown, and another thing, especially, you know, I run a small business. And of course, it's not so easy for any of us to just say, well, we've learnt from lockdown that future schedules aren't great and let's all ditch it. Well, especially as a small business owner, that's not really going to happen. But on the other hand, isn't it good to see how we could reimagine things? Wouldn't it be fun to just know that we can play with it? Maybe all the planning that we so incessantly do as a culture, maybe that's not quite as necessary as we all had thought. Maybe it is easier for us all to just be here now and sort of surrender to the ups and downs. And I think it's interesting because I think letting go of the prevailing cultural norm that we all have to be busy, we have to do things which are on our to-do list, we have to learn how to be more productive, we have to do our things to-do list. Well, the world is so full of productivity hacks and apps to help us do this, that and the other, to track our performance so that we can be as efficient and productive as possible, tie us further to the chains of time and all the incessant scheduling in life. But how would it be if we are able to start to let go of some of these things? What is it that we sort of fear so much about that, about just living in the present? Is it something that we'd even be able to contemplate? I think that it's useful to think of water and to think of how it would be to go against the current versus going with the current. You've got to go with the tide. You can't go against it. And if you go with it, then you go to somewhere interesting. But, fighting against it seems exhausting. And I think maybe that's part of what sort of normal life is all about. It's a pretty exhausting process. It's complicated and maybe a bit overcomplicated. So really, I suppose what I've been doing is doing more of the small things. Like many people, I've been cooking more, enjoying spending time cooking, enjoying preparing the vegetables and the process of preparation. It's a practice of mindfulness. It's a practice of being here. We're not sort of cooking for the end destination, which is the food always, but it's for the appreciation of the time and effort that's been taken for each and every thing that we consume, and appreciation for the sunshine, for the soil, for the water, for the farmers, for whoever's produced it, for all of the people involved in the processes in getting that food. It's immensely complicated. It can't be wasted. It's all something which I think really needs some time considering. And in that vein, I've been also spending time growing my own a little bit more because I've had more time. I've been just doing little things, growing cress on the windowsills, and it's made me very happy. It's a small pleasure in life. I've been gaining a simple kind of pleasure from my little vegetable gardens, from putting hands in the soil. It's a very grounding thing, and we often talk about yoga as grounding, and we think, well, what is grounding? And grounding, I suppose, is that process of getting out of our heads, getting out of our thoughts, because being human in this modern age can be very much like we are our heads, we are the content of what's in our brains, and our brains are always right. Whereas, maybe just listening to that very simple thing of what's my body doing right now? Where am I at in myself? And that really is about, reconnecting to the earth and spending more time outside, doing bits of gardening and growing our own, and then realizing what that process is. So I think those are the sort of ways that I've found to declutter and simplify my life during lockdown. And I really want, and I'm forming the very firm intention, affirmation that I'm going to continue to do this in my life, because that feeling of spaciousness that it's brought has been really, really special. And I'd love to hear what lessons that you might have learnt from lockdown. It'd be lovely to hear on the Movers group. Let me know. Let's have a conversation around it, because there might be things that you have possibly taken for granted that you think, oh, of course everyone feels this, but we don't. Everyone's so different. We're all having our own different experiences, and we are all in the same boat, but we've all got very different realities of it. So I think it's really, really interesting for us all to just be able to support each other in this reimagining of how it could be living a more simple life. All right, take care of yourselves.